The research that I've done has developed over time, and you'll find out as we go on why that is. I've lived by the loop for about 17 years, and I was really excited when I heard that Use It may have some communications with Urban Splash, who are developing the loop, and particularly a building called the old Tubeworks, which was initially, the first hearing that I got was that they wanted a community hub in that building. My idea was to interview local residents as to if there is a community hub, how would you use it, what would you want in it? That was what's missing from the area. That was the first thought. As the project developed, I found more about Urban Splash's requirements, which were actually not so much a community hub, but we have a building here that we want the community to use for social enterprise. We really want the community to get involved with it. How can we make that work? And at the same time, I became involved with a project that was happening on the other side of the reservoir, on a playing field, which is Birmingham Settlements project, and they are developing that area as well. And both of these, Urban Splash and Birmingham Settlement, are interested in how we can use food and what we can do with growing and producing and selling food in the area. So those were some of the things that I was starting off from. The purpose of the study, really, I wanted to recognise the existing community. I am a passionate destroyer of barriers. I hate them, and I'm very concerned, I'm very aware of the fact that a road is a barrier, a canal even more so. And when Urban Splash said that they wanted to build an island, I got very concerned. So part of what I want to do is to look at the importance of integration. The Port Loop Manifesto says, I'm quoting this, from MIT Media Lab Changing Places, they say, our cities need dynamic, networked, self-regulating systems that take into account complex interactions. I can't think of a much more complex interaction than that between an area that has been described as part of one of the most deprived areas in the country and one of the most new, up-and-coming, trendy places to live. That, on an island, that is going to be a very complex interaction. What we want to do is to get that integrated. We want to try and do something that will discourage rivalry. We can't pretend that gangs don't exist in our city. We want to do something that is going to not have people going in there and sprawling graffiti all over the place as soon as it's built. We want to have something that's going to get those people active and integrated in the area. So the questions that drove the project were, what can the existing community bring into the development? How can the communities build each other up? And how can we enable integration? The methodology, obviously interviews. I conducted 3 semi-structured interviews over a period of 3 months with local residents. I had hoped to do more, but other things got in the way. They were kind of iterative. The topic guides changed with not just what the previous interviewee had said, but also, as I've mentioned before, the new information that came in about what was actually happening in the space that I was talking about. Interviewees were given an overview of Use It and this particular project. They were given information regarding confidentiality and anonymity, and they all completed consent forms. One interviewee requested sight of the questions beforehand so that they could prepare, and they were given that. Interviewees were an older white lady born and bred in Birmingham with adult children, both with special needs, who is involved in a food project. A gentleman in his mid-50s who's working in the wellness sector, who is a white British man active in the local community, and an African-born lady who is a young mum attending a lot of local activities with her children. Following the interviews were transcribed, and the notes, audio copies, topic guides were all passed on to the university. My questions were around: what is your current experience in the area? What's good? What's missing? What is the best use we can make of the new spaces that are coming up? And, which I think is probably the most important bit, what can you do? The questions stayed more or less the same throughout the whole thing, but obviously I did have to add different prompts and questions as I found out more about the development. So we may have the opportunity to talk to developers about an area of land and part of a building and how they could be used. And developers are now looking for viable business opportunities that we can put in there. How could you help? So on the question of what your current experiences, people praised the park and the reservoir, the community spirit that we've got in the area and the activities that are happening already, bus services and transport services, the shopping facilities, real junk food projects, and the fact that the leisure centre is finally being built after many, many years' wait. What's missing? Cafes, an indoor space where people can freely meet up, ways to bring cultural groups together and to overcome the language barriers that are an issue within the area. And drop-in facilities were requested for every group under the sun: the elderly and the isolated, young people, people with additional needs, children and families. Activities, drop-ins, anything that we can provide that will just work with the community. The need for cultural sensitivity and inclusivity. People talked about things like having women's only groups, for example at the leisure centre, but also in other things that we do. Somebody suggested a link person for each section of the community, an outgoing person who knows everybody in their local community, who can convey the community's needs back to use it and let them know all of the things that are going to be happening. We were told that accessibility was important, not just mobility, that should be a baseline, but things about thinking like sensitivity to people with sensory processing issues, for example, and making sure that there are quiet and calming spaces that people can retreat to when they need to. Good communication and advertising, not just regarding what is going to happen at the moment, which is actually quite difficult to find. You have to go online and really hunt for it. There is a barge that you can go to as well. But also regarding the events and the projects that are going to happen and ongoing businesses that start up. There were concerns. There was a concern as to once Use It is finished and the development is complete, where is the funding going to come from for new projects? And there were a very big concern, which we've already kind of touched on in a way, that is the development going to cause local landlords, of which there are many, to put up their prices and drive out the people who are such a transient population, but where will they go? And that was a really big concern, and something that if there's any way that we can put that out there and get that addressed, that would be really useful. What do people want? They want a cultural and community hub. So this is a space that's homely, welcoming, engaging, and fully used all the time by the local community. They want cross-cultural ventures. Somebody suggested using cookery so that everybody were to cook dishes from their own, teaching people how to cook their cultural dishes and using that as a way of learning English. Also the idea of using maybe dance classes for children or music classes for children, all as a way of learning English and teaching. Blending projects was something else that was mentioned. So, for example, the locally sourced food that is cooked at the cookery classes could then be taken by volunteers out to elderly and isolated people who would then have somebody to chat to by virtue of that. So that's a new project that somebody had come up with. Economically and sustainable ventures that were mentioned included co-working spaces, maker spaces, tutoring centres such as Kumon, classes like language classes, music, dance, spaces to trade locally grown produce, and a cafe. People want a cafe which would use locally sourced food, possibly linked to the Real Junk Food project, and sell locally produced arts and crafts. A focus on community well-being and personal well-being was important to people. They wanted, for example, growing together sessions, arts for wellness projects, a community fridge freezer project, and a place where people can meet and support each other, and encouraging people who work part-time to volunteer in the projects that happen. So the Reservoir playing field, people wanted us to listen to the local community, sell their produce locally, link up with local growing spaces, which there are many. Growers therapy, we already have polytunnels and growing spaces starting there. Link up to education, so that's schools, additional needs, and adults. Have big community events there, which again have already started. Somebody suggested boot sales and exchange events. They again want another coffee shop. We can't have too many coffee shops. A maze, and somebody actually wanted a small-scale farm with chickens. I think we should have goats as well. Okay, so then I did ask people what they could bring to the project. Although one person said they were already at full capacity, the others were very keen on bringing their expertise. Somebody said that they could work with people on the autistic spectrum and do autism awareness training. And somebody else said that they would like to teach French and like to bring in cancer awareness training. So finally, you'll be glad to hear, what next? I would like to broaden the reach of my research if possible. I find that interviews appear to be quite, maybe not the most cost-effective way of doing a large amount of information gathering, which is what I think is needed. So I would like to look at different styles of capturing that information. So maybe group gatherings and maybe surveys like SurveyMonkey or something like that somebody suggested. I feel that would get us more information in a short space of time as to what strengths there are in the local community and what local people can bring to the project. And then I would like to use the interviews themselves to maybe go out to the developers and say, these are the things we've found, what you can do about it. We can then go on to strengthen the links with USIT's partners and service providers to actually make these things happen. I believe that's doable. I don't think that's too out of the way. And I think that we can use that to, maybe ensuring is a bit of a strong word there, but enabling the local community to be integrated and the most vulnerable members of that community to at least stay safe and secure. I'm really thrilled that within such a short time, we seem to have got to a space where what people want and what the developers want is matching. And I believe that we can actually get the old and the new communities working together.